guess we'll get started again, eh? The quicker we get started, the quicker you can get some dinner. That's not a bad idea from what I can see out there. All right, we'll move into our second presentation. This time we're looking at the last empire, and ancient mysteries reveal the future about our own time, as we'll see. Kaiser Wilhelm, of course, he was the leader of Germany in the First World War. He was once asked to repair the roof of the Metz Cathedral. Now, Metz at this time was in Germany. It's now in France today because after the First World War they drew the lines in different places. But it was in Germany. They said, "Kaiser, our roof is leaking. Can you fix it up?" He said, "Yes, on one condition." He said, "Around your cathedral you've got some statues. One of them is the statue of the prophet Daniel. You take the head of Daniel off and you make a replica of my head and pop it on top of his body and I'll fix your roof." This is true. Why did Kaiser Wilhelm do that? Why did he want to get Daniel's head taken off? Well, we'll find out a little bit later on. Now, we saw that the book of Daniel is a 6th century BC book, no question, from archaeology and history. A favourite of the people who copied those Dead Sea Scrolls we saw. And it contains predictions concerning our own time, and we're going to share one of them right now. In the 2nd chapter of Daniel's book, he says that King Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of Babylon at the time, he had a dream, and when the king woke up, he wanted to know the meaning of the dream. He was deeply disturbed by this dream. Now, we know that's actually true now, that dreams were important to the Babylonians. It wasn't just Daniel made this up, because you can go to the British Museum and you will see Dream Omen Tablet, meaning they thought dreams were something to do with the future. So this wasn't just some concocted story of some guy who wrote the Bible or something. No, this is the way they believed back then. So he wants to know, what does my dream mean? Because the idea is, if the dream says you're going to die tomorrow in, let's say you're going to die tomorrow in Babylon, he's going to say, well, I'm not going to go to Babylon tomorrow, I'm going to go somewhere else, then I won't die in Babylon, I won't die at all. So they put their stock on these dreams. So he wants to know, what does it mean? Because it must mean something, and I need to avert disaster, or maybe I can pick up some goodies, whatever the dream is about. So he calls in his advisors. And the biblical writer Daniel says some of these were what we would call psychics. He mentions magicians, astrologers, and so on. And we know that is also true, because the Babylonians were big into astrology. You can go to the Louvre Museum today, go into the Mesopotamian section, and you will see this tablet here. It's a Babylonian astrology chart. If you can read the cuneiform, you'll be able to work out your love life. Maybe. But they practice this. And so whoever wrote the Bible was talking about real facts. So he says to them, I want to know the dream. They said, no problem. You tell us what you dreamt and we'll fix it up for you. He says, that's the problem. I forgot what I dreamt. You ever had dreams like that? Where you, man, that was a nightmare, but I can't even remember a thing. Well, I said, I can't remember it. They said, well, how can we tell you what it means if you don't tell us what it was? He said, well, if you're smart, you tell me what I dreamt, then I'll believe the spin you put on it. Not a bad way to go, to see whether they were real. And they said, well, we couldn't do that. Nobody can tell you what you dreamt, King, not even the gods who live out there somewhere. Only they could tell you, sorry. But they're not around here, so we can't help you. He said, okay, well, you lose your head, don't you? Now, that's the way they dealt with advisors back in Daniel's day, in Babylon, that is. Imagine if our Prime Minister dealt with his advisors like that. I don't think everyone would come along for a job at Parliament House there, would they, to be his advisor. But anyway, that's the way the Babylonians dealt it. So Daniel, they go to take his head off because he's an advisor. He's not an astrologer, but he is an advisor. So they go to him and they say, Daniel, we come to kill you, man. So what's this all about? They tell him the story of the dream, and he goes home and he says to his friends, hey, we better pray. There's no atheists in foxholes, is there? And when we get caught between a rock and a hard place, everybody cries out, God help me, when we're going down on the ship or something. So Daniel prays, and that night, according to his second chapter, he is given the same dream that the king had the night before. So he goes into the king and he says, "King, I'm coming to tell you what you dreamt." He said, "You saw this humongous statue that was made of various metals. The head of this statue was made of solid gold. And that golden head gave way to the chest and arms of silver. And then came the belly and thighs made of bronze or brass, and then the legs were made of iron, and then the feet, they were made of iron and clay. Then you saw a rock cut out of a mountain without any human hands. It smashed the image on the feet, it smashed it to pieces, the wind blew it all away, and that stone became a humongous mountain, and it said it filled up the whole world." Now the king's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He said, that's exactly what I dreamt. Now what does it mean? Tell me, what does this thing mean? Now Daniel proceeds to give him a succession of 4 world empires in the Mediterranean, Middle Eastern world, one after another through time. And it culminates with the last empire, the rock that smashes the image on the feet. So he begins, "King, the head of gold, that's you, your kingdom, Babylon. You are this head of gold." Now the Babylonians lasted for about 70 years as the number one superpower in the Mediterranean Middle Eastern world. From 605 BC, when Nebuchadnezzar's father Nabopolassar made it the number one superpower, to when they lose it in 539 BC. But he says, "King, there's another power that's coming." By the way, Babylon was a golden empire, no question. The temple of Marduk had lots of gold in it. When Alexander the Great came, he still, this is after the Medes and the Persians and the Greeks. But when he comes, he takes away 500 camels loaded with gold. It's a very wealthy empire. What he says, Daniel says, "There's another power coming. After you shall arise another kingdom that will be inferior to yours. That's the silver kingdom. That's the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians." Whenever you go to the British Museum, if you go to London sometime, go to the British Museum, go to the Louvre Museum, go to the museum if you can get to Iran. Probably not so safe there right now for most people. You're not allowed to go there. Your insurance won't cover you right now, because we're supposed to go there next year and we had to cancel Iran because there's no insurance cover right now. It's not a good idea to go. Anyway, you go to some of those museums and you will see silver is very important to the Medo-Persians. Silver plates, silver bowls, ram's headed, silver articles, amazing. This was very important to the Medes and the Persians. Now they defeated the Babylonians in 539 BC. It was Cyrus who conquered the Babylonians. Cyrus actually is mentioned in the Bible 150 years before he takes Babylon. It's amazing predictions in the book of Isaiah, which was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. If you ever go to the British Museum, make sure you see the Cyrus cylinder. It's very famous today. It says pretty much what the Bible says, that the Medo-Persians conquered the Babylonians. And they let the people go back to their cities, back to build their temples. In fact, Cyrus helped the Jews rebuild their temple. That's all mentioned in the Bible. And this item, this article, this clay tablets about so big, backs up exactly what the Bible says. So the Medo-Persians rule from 539 BC to 331 BC. But Daniel continues as he talks to the king. "King," he says, "there's coming a third empire, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. It will top." When he says over all the earth, he means the Mediterranean region that he's talking about. Greece defeated the Medo-Persians. By 331 BC, Greece is the dominant power in the Mediterranean, Middle Eastern world. Now, by the way, of course, the Greeks, bronze was very famous to them, wasn't it? Bronze shields, bronze helmets, and so on and so forth. Very important to the Greeks. Alexander the Great defeated the Medo-Persians, especially at the Battle of Arbela. There were a number of battles, but in this one was sort of like the nail in the coffin for the Medo-Persians back then. And the Greeks came to power. Now, When the Medo-Persians invaded Greece, they did it at least twice, once under Darius the Great, a second time under Xerxes. Xerxes invaded Greece and they destroyed much of the things on the Acropolis right up there, and the Greeks never forgot it and never forgave them for that. They fought the Battle of Salamis in naval battle, and the Greeks defeated the Medo-Persians in that battle. So when they came to Persepolis under Alexander the Great, these are magnificent ruins you can see in Iran. Amazing. I mean, some of the things that are still left is just mind-boggling. But they destroyed the city of Persepolis. This, of course, mentions kings like Xerxes and Darius. These are people mentioned in the Bible, by the way. These kings, all of them mentioned. And we have all of the information about these kings from Iran today. So the Greeks rule from 331 BC right down to 168 BC, and then comes the fourth kingdom. Daniel says finally there'll be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron. Now, it was the Romans who defeated the Greeks. In fact, historians call Rome the Iron Monarchy. And they were a tremendous fighting machine. They ruled from 168 BC as a united empire to 476 AD. They were a formidable fighting machine in the Mediterranean region. They go, as we said, down to 476 AD, nearly 600 years as a united Roman Empire. But Daniel presses on as he talks to this king 2,500 years ago. He says, whereas you saw the feet and toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom will be divided. Rome will be divided, in other words, so the kingdom will be partly strong and partly fragile. Now, Western Rome is split up by 476. The Western Roman Empire disintegrates, thanks to the barbaric tribes, we call them, and the Roman Empire continues in the east. The Roman emperors moved their capital to Istanbul, we call it today, or Constantinople. They called it Constantine's city. So the breakup of the western part of the Roman Empire, that was by the groups like the Anglo-Saxons, the Franks, the Burgundians. These groups eventually became what we call the nations of Western Europe today. The Anglo-Saxons became the English, the Franks, the French, and so on. All right, so Western Rome, the breakup of the Western Roman Empire becomes Western Europe, we would say. It goes from 476 till the rock comes, the end of Daniel's vision. All right, as you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere one to another, just as iron does not mix with clay. In other words, human beings are going to try to reunite these powers, but it's not going to work, was the prediction of Daniel 2,500 years ago. Never to be reunited like the Babylonians were, the Greeks, the Medo-Persians, or the Romans. Not going to happen, says Daniel in his prediction. Now, there have been many attempts to unite Europe down through the centuries. For example, around about 800, 900 AD, Charlemagne is the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, which was neither holy nor was it really Roman. But anyway, he failed. We come to Louis XIV, the Sun King of France. He tried, but he failed as well. And Napoleon Bonaparte, he gave it a good old shot, didn't he? Sure did, but the Russian winter defeated him, and he went there with thousands of soldiers, came back with very few really, compared to what he went to fight the Russians with. And of course, he had predicted there will be one Europe, there will be one currency, there will be one language, there will be one government over all of Europe, it said that he said. But when he was defeated by Wellington and the Germans at the Battle of Waterloo, this is what he said: God Almighty is too much for me. Maybe he's reading Daniel's book, I don't know. But that's what he said to have said. Kaiser Wilhelm, remember the guy who's going to fix the roof? You can understand now. Why doesn't he want Daniel's head? Because he doesn't like the prediction. His aim was to take all of Europe. It went pretty close. It went very close, but he failed. And, They did put his head on top of there, but he lost the power. All right, what about Adolf Hitler? This was his aim. One people, one empire, one leader, namely him. The 1,000-year Reich lasted only about 15, 16 years. And all of the tragedy that went with the Second World War in Europe, a disaster for many, many, many people. He failed because there had been a prediction in the book of Daniel 2,500 years before, they will not adhere one to another. Daniel's writings even predicted that they would try marriage alliances. Look what it says here. They will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. You can go to Denmark, to the Frederiksberg Castle, and you can see some of the pictures of the intermarriage between the houses of royalty in Europe. They got all mixed up. You know, this Prince of France going to marry a Princess of Spain for alliances, for territory and so on, and it all failed. They still fought like cats and dogs, and it didn't help, because the Bible had predicted by Daniel, they will not cleave one to another. And you know, while we're sitting here now, there's another attempt going on to unite Europe. It's called the United States of Europe. Time magazine spelt it out and gave quotes of what some of the ambitions were for a united Europe. We call it the European Union, don't we? Back in the time of President Mitterrand of France, look what he said. A great power is being born. We're going to get there. How about this one from Helmut Kohl? He was the Chancellor of Germany back then. The course is irreversible. We're going to make it. And Romano Prodi, he even came up. He was, of course, the Italian Prime Minister at one stage and the leader of the European Union. We can and we will succeed in creating a unified, prosperous, democratic Europe where citizens can live in peace and freedom, from Time magazine. Nice try, Mr. Prodi. Have you ever heard of Brexit? One of the leading powers of Europe pulled out. And others have talked about it. A prophet 2,500 years ago said they would never be united. And while we're here tonight, that's still how it is. Now, that is uncanny to think that Daniel predicted all those things so long ago. That's why we say this book has not only historical reliability, but prophetic dependability. No question about it. Well, Daniel continues on and he says, you watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Now he's talking about the stone. What does the rock represent which hits the image on the feet? Well, after dinner, we'll continue the story. Okay? We're going to go and look. Now, but I want you to notice something fascinating here. All of those kingdoms were predicted to come and go, and he mentions them by name in his 8th chapter, many of them. But he gives so much detail as we can easily see who it is. They've all come, they've all gone. You can bet your bottom dollar, if I was a gambling man, I don't know about you, Chris, I'd put my money on that the next thing's going to happen after all that lot. They've all happened. We can be sure the next, that rock. So prophetic reliability, historical accuracy. Those are the two things you need if you want a source that can predict where we're heading in the future. And the biblical manuscripts check out with those two things. All right, that's not what we want. This is where we're heading next. Global warnings, ancient Jerusalem, today, tomorrow and you. That's where we'll be heading after dinner. We'll go back to this prophecy, but we're going to go to the city of Jerusalem. We're going to see amazing things predicted 2,000 years ago about what's happening today here in our own country. Thanks, Chris.